on the old iPad, I'm going to go ahead and launch the iPhone on StreamYard to push out to some of those lemming platforms. But we're also going streaming live on Getter, Telegram, I believe, and there will be more channels coming soon. Massive updates coming, folks, during today's broadcast of the Ivan Raiklin Report. It's because I have not been live for, I can't even remember. Maybe it's been since last Wednesday, because last week, Monday and Tuesday, we had uh, rerun, if I'm not mistaken, or I had a, no, I think, let me back up. 2 weeks ago, I attended multiple conferences. And then this last week, I went to Vegas for the Reawaken tour. So let's just do a quick recap. Went to Austin, Texas about a week, what is it, over a week ago, to, as I was nominated for the American Liberty Awards for Best Legal Bulldog. But I didn't win. It was Tom Renz. Congratulations, Mr. Tom Renz. Then I headed to Indianapolis to have a meeting with Speaker Robin Vos and then investigate to see what was going on with the Uniparty legislatures on how they're going to put together a plan and path, probably on the sidelines during those discussions, of how they will remove President Trump off the ballot so that they can steal the election, so that they don't face consequences and retribution from a second term of President Trump. And then I followed up with that by going to Mike Lindell's Election Crime Bureau Summit. Thanks to Mr. Mike Lindell for giving me the opportunity to attend NCSL and to attend his Election Crime Bureau Summit, where I happened to bump into and meet the beloved Brandon House. Yep. Brandon House is the one that forced me into this show, the Ivan Raiklin Report, on his program, the wvwtv.com. And to be honest, I kind of enjoy it. So don't let him know. Don't tell him thanks, because at the end of the day, he's the one that's forcing me into it. I'll keep busting his chops every time I see him. Anyway, great American patriot, Mr. Brandon House, also Mike Lindell. Now, let's kind of catch up to last few days. So Thursday, I believe, maybe it was Friday. No, Friday morning, or maybe it was Thursday. It was Thursday morning. I headed out to Las Vegas and happened to have a bunch of meetings with some podcasters, did a bunch of shows on different podcasts to include His Glory. And to be honest, there was a litany of interviews that I did over the course of the next several days to include Friday and Saturday, this last few days. And the key topic of discussion was my research into January 6th, where we need to go next. Also, I talked about what the path forward is to bankrupt the private companies that are pivotal in skewing and manipulating at scale our electoral system, and how do we basically push back against them and bankrupt them. So those interviews will be coming out over my different channels: Telegram, Truth, Gab. What else? Primarily it's going to be Telegram, Truth, and X, I think, at this point. And I'll also be discussing that here. But the most important thing that I would like to hit in terms of what happened at the Reawaken America tour is that not only did we have Roseanne Barr attending, not only was Roger Stone there, and by the way, I'm going to post on my social media later today the massive line that was there to get a selfie with Roger Stone, as well as General Flynn. So thanks to Clay Clark for hosting that. Unfortunately, I was a backup speaker, but because the local authorities, due to political reasons, cut short the timing of the event. So not only are they trying to censor us digitally, but also physically they're trying to curtail the length of these events so that fewer speakers can speak the truth. And so I did not have an opportunity to speak, but that's fine, because the key component of attending these events is the networking and the discussions that occur on the sidelines, and obviously the podcast interviews that we do. But the most important thing from my perspective that occurred was on Friday at 3 p.m. Las Vegas time. And I'm not sure if it's been released yet, but I did have a press conference with several patriots. I was invited to. Actually, it was a press conference organized by Dr. Simone Gold, Sarah Maccabee, Mickey Whithoff, and Miss Nicole Reffett. And they happened to invite me to participate to give an update on the political hostage crisis known as the J6 political hostage crisis. And there I essentially laid out why Kevin McCarthy is not able to really release the tapes, because he doesn't, even if he did have a spine, even if he was a patriot, which obviously he is not, and he does not have a spine, but even if he did, it would be very difficult for him to release the CCTV footage. And that's simply because the Capitol Police Board, well, I should say, the Capitol Police Chief and the General Counsel are really the two individuals that get to decide on what CCTV footage gets released and which ones to designate as security footage that doesn't need to be released. So between those two individuals and the head of Intel and Interagency Coordination Division, those three people in the Capitol Police are the ones primarily with the discretionary authority on deciding for the release of the CCTV footage. And so until we can create the necessary leverage over those individuals through the Capitol Police Board, we're going to have a hard time trying to release all the footage. But we're working on ways to do that, and I laid it out in that press conference. That was on Friday. And I'll be posting, I think I did a live stream of that press conference. I'm not sure how good the audio was. I did put it out on StreamYard to my multiple platforms. But take a look. It's on all the different platforms to include Getter, and I cover it there. And I think there were probably 10 other people, maybe 15 others that did record that press conference. So I'll be posting those up as I receive those. Now, that's last week. Big day today. What happened today, folks? Well, as I'm talking, I'm getting so many people telling me that they're getting spammed by spoof accounts of mine. And what does that mean normally? Normally, when I'm over the target and the content that I'm pushing out is so truthful and so painful for the uniparty deep state scum, they have to create fake accounts to go ahead and distract, distort, and annoy those that are diligently trying to learn and follow my content. So then they create content, or they create accounts, then direct message people, and then it starts to get in the way of my content production, and also gets in the way of people. Let's just say many people start to unfollow, and that's the whole purpose of why they do it. Many people start to unfollow my accounts because they think that I'm trying to sell them something. The only thing that I sell is my content, which is I have a Substack. I have other content push that I do that helps support my work. And that's it. I don't try to engage with people direct message unless you know for sure I'm reaching out to you. And I don't do it on Facebook, okay? And I don't do it on Instagarbage. And I don't do it on any of these other scum platforms. Okay? Now, with that little distraction off to the side, what happened today? Big day today. I went down to Washington, D.C., and in the absence of congressional hearings, which, by the way, they're going to be on a hiatus in their home districts until that third week of September. So I think September 19th, 20th will be the first dates where you'll see the next hearings. But in the absence of congressional hearings, we have court cases going on at the Federal District Court in Washington, D.C. on Constitution Avenue. So the two big cases that occurred today, it was a trial date hearing for United States government, the illegitimate, belligerent executive branch DOJ is persecuting President Donald J. Trump because they don't want him to secure a second term, because then he's going to absolutely destroy and obliterate the deep state. So anyway, they're still continuing on with that, and they decided in March they're going to have their trial. But I guess President Trump, in his truth statements earlier today, said that he will be appealing that, and maybe they'll push that trial for a later date so that he actually can campaign during the primary, instead of there being election interference at the highest order. Because Super Tuesday, many primaries are going to be occurring in March of 2024. Now, aside from that, by the way, I did go to DC, the courthouse, and I observed who was attending. And I'm going to disclose some things that I've yet to disclose up to this point in any content that I've ever pushed out. So listen in closely, folks. There are many reporters that attend the courthouse, and they have a press room on the first floor in the DC District Court. And sometimes they're in the press room, the media individuals. Sometimes they're standing in the hallway trying to see who's coming in, who's to the grand jury, particularly the DC one for President Trump. From the usual suspects: Commie News Network, Politico. I know some people pronounce it differently, but yeah, you have your Politico. Today, for example, you had two individuals from Reuters that were in attendance. So anyway, I think the main disinformation purveyors that are based out of DC, that have a strong presence in the English language, are probably those three that I mentioned. You also have Nothing But Chumps, I believe is what the NBC stands for, right? And some of the other one. And so you got to keep in mind that when you're consuming content from Nothing But Chumps, All But Chumps, right? Chumps broadcasts. What's the S stand for? Chumps broadcasting superlatively, right? Supposedly. So any of those programs, Reuters, or any of the other Politicos of the world, the New York and DC based disinformation purveyors, or Washington Compost, for example, sometimes shows up. Normally shows up. They have an individual that reports on the courts. And then you have, what's the other one? New York Slimes. For some reason, I haven't seen too much presence of the New York Slimes reporters, particularly as it applies to the court there. I think they probably just republish and rebroadcast the content from the Compost. But needless to say, the reason why I mention the names is that they show up, and these individuals are tasked to write a story, right? And they write the story in the frame that they want, with the skewing, manipulation, and bias that their bosses are trying to promulgate for their particular objective. And they know that they're going to control the narrative because, let's be honest, how many people are actually going to go to attend the hearing? Well, 25 to 30 people, right? So I may be one of them. That's not too many people of the 330, 40 million people in America, right? Very small percentage, less than 0.001. And how many people are going to read the transcript from these particular hearings? Maybe a few hundred, right? Maybe at maximum a few thousand. So then it's up to the disinformation purveyors to convince and manipulate the country on what occurred during that particular hearing. Now, in some of these hearings, there's not much going on. But say, for example, in the other hearing that occurred today with Dr. Peter Navarro. Peter Navarro was a very senior advisor on trade and economic policy in the White House for President Trump. One of only 3 members of the Trump team to have survived and lasted his entire term. That says a lot. You know why? Because that means the unipart, he was able, let me frame it this way, he was able to repel the uniparty, particularly those on the right with the China First Republicans that were in the White House and in the Congress and etc. He was able to deflect and repel from their overreach and weaponization, because at that point they had pushed a lot of people out. So what do they do subsequent? They try to get him on through Congress, 117th Congress, on contempt of Congress. Why? Because, well, he had conversation, according to today's hearing, I was in there. According to today's hearings, President Trump, in conversations with Peter Navarro, had asked him to invoke executive privilege, and Peter Navarro did. And because he did that, Congress said he was in contempt of Congress. We're referring to in contempt of Nancy Pelosi, okay? Here's the big issue. I don't understand why he and his attorneys are using the courts as the clearest and easiest pathway to repel against this, I would use the term, stupidity. The easiest path to address his contempt of Congress charge is to go ahead and file a email, text message, phone call, and if you really want to make it formal, you go ahead and send a memorandum to the office of the Speaker of the House, and then CC the J6 committee. And in that memo, you basically request, Speaker McCarthy, your Congress that you are the Speaker of filed criminal charges against myself, Peter Navarro. Steve Bannon can do the same thing. And in that memo say, hey, would you please consider having me to come in? Two options. Number one, dismissing the criminal referral since you are the authority that originated it, meaning the Speaker of the House. Or two, let's set a time and date certain for me to come in and testify related to the original subpoena of the J6 committee, and I would be happy to answer questions by actually coming in, thus rendering the original criminal referral moot. And now the federal district court in D.C. does not have standing to take the case because the Article 1 branch of government reasserted its authority over this issue and doesn't want it to be litigated in the courts. This is advice to Mr. Dr. Navarro and Mr. Steve Bannon. Now, I also had an opportunity to have an interview after. By the way, I did mention it briefly that this should be the strategy for two of Dr. Navarro's attorneys during the break and after the hearing. And I also, in the past, have mentioned this to Mr. Bannon. Now, I get it. I'm nobody. I'm irrelevant. But why not just go ahead and try that half-page memo to Mr. Speaker of the House and say, hey, why don't you just pull back the criminal referrals? Because guess what? That's a pretty simple ask. And if he doesn't do it, well, guess what, America? You know where Mr. Kevin McCarthy stands. He is in support of Nancy Pelosi. He is tied and leveraged and manipulated, coerced, and somehow blackmailed by Pelosi, Liz Cheney, and others in that J6 cover-up committee if he refuses to drop those criminal referrals. And while we're at it, Mr. Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, how about you go ahead and drop all criminal referrals as it relates to what? Why don't you go ahead and demand and request and demand the Capitol Police to go ahead and dismiss all nonviolent criminal charges as it relates to January 6th. And because you haven't done it yet, And because you are not going to do it, it should show everybody where his loyalties are. They are to Nancy Pelosi. They are to Benny Thompson. His loyalties are to Liz Cheney because she has compromising material by recording conversations of her with Kevin McCarthy that she's probably sitting on in order to have the necessary leverage over him to not do the right thing and clear things up related to January 6th. And that's why he's not pushing for the release of the tapes. That's why he's not pushing for the CCTV footage, right, to be released. That's why he's not pushing the general counsel, Thomas DeBias, to release the tapes. That's why he's not pushing the House Sergeant at Arms to work with him, the acting Sergeant at Arms McFarland, to push the Capitol Police Chief to go ahead and release the footage. You see how things play, folks? Why am I the only one exposing this? I need help. Learn, educate yourself, fact check everything I'm saying. Take a look at Title III of the U.S., how the Capitol Police Board is set up, right? It's frustrating, but guess what? I'm only going to escalate as people try to spoof my accounts to make it look like it's not me, to divert, distract. Guess what? I'm only going to increase my content flow and educate as many people as I can. 1,000 people here on Getter, 1,000 people there on, several thousand here, there. I don't know what the numbers are, but in the collective, I know I'm reaching out to tens of thousands of folks, and sometimes it's in the millions based on the virality of some of the things that I put out on X. So I know I'm not having a zero impact to the national conversation, but we need folks that were previous. You could call them cowards. You can call them asleep. I think we need to activate some of these bigger platforms and bigger names that claim to be independent. They need to wake up to exactly learning the individuals within the deep state by name, date, place, time, transgression, location, everything. And the only person that I'm aware of that's going into all of those details of identifying who these deep state actors are whom? I know who it is. You're looking at one of them. I've done the deep dive for years and years and years. Have them take, if they don't believe it, they can take a look at my Substack series that I put out, listing all the transgressions and counterintelligence vulnerabilities of Kevin McCarthy. I did a 13-part series. They can go ahead and look at my research and deep dive into the Fedsurrection coup plotters and executioners over at the Article 1 branch of government. Pelosi, her daughter, her son-in-law, John Sullivan, Ray Epps, the Capitol Police, acting police chief Pittman, and then the subsequent Manger right now. And then we talk about Thomas DeBias, the general counsel, with his covering up of the previous coup. There's so much out there and everybody's ignoring it. Now I'm going to close with this because let me see where we're at here in terms of time. Got a few minutes left. A couple things that happened today that need to be captured while it's still in my brain contemporaneously. I spoke with two reporters from Reuters, right? And I told them, hey kids, guess what? You need to ask the following questions of the following individuals. Actually, you know what? You need to look up the following individuals first and foremost. Why don't you look up Yogananda Pittman, head of IICD, and then the acting Capitol Police Chief? Why don't you look up the General Counsel of U.S. Capitol Police? Why don't you look up the current Chief of Capitol Police, Thomas Manger? And oh, by the way, why don't you look up Alexandra Pelosi and Michael Voss and ask Michael Voss why he was meeting with John Sullivan on January 5th at noon at the W Hotel lobby. And what were they talking about? And what was John Sullivan subsequently a few hours later doing, standing with and talking to Ray Epps? And then I walked away. Who else did I encounter? Oh, DC's main disinformation purveyor as it applies to Politics, Politico. I've been talking to this kid for months asking him, guess what, buddy? why don't you ever interview me? I know why you don't want to interview me, because I am going to unravel this entire bogus BS scheme. And I'm on the cusp of naming this kid's name, but I'm going to hold back right now because I'm going to give him one last opportunity to write a legitimate story about who I am, the tweet Operation Pence Card, who was later retweeted by President Trump, and that is the initial fact timeline within the criminal indictment for Trump that they're using to somehow criminalize calling out. Basically, they're criminalizing those that call out Mike Pence for illegally certifying the 2020 election. And he's got, the deep state has to essentially criminalize Trump so that they can foist their beloved deep state handler of Trump for the first term and then reward him with the presidency. I am probably one of the key figures that is the roadblock to that happening, but they can circumvent me if I don't make it into the court of public opinion at scale. That's why I've been dead named by mainstream media since June of 2022. Last person I want to mention. You know this kid named Manu Raju? He works for the Commie News Network. Yeah, I bump into him there on Capitol Hill, and I told him the same thing. Hey, bud, you're so brilliant. You're such a genius. You know everything about what's going on in Congress. Yep. Guess what, little kitty? You might want to look at the indictment. You might want to ask the question, if you're such a critical thinker. Hey, page 32 of the criminal indictment, line 88, it talks about the defendant, meaning President Trump, retweeted a tweet with a memo. Why don't you ask the question like, well, if it was a retweet, what was the original tweet and who tweeted it? And I said, guess what, buddy? The guy talking to you right now, his account is the one that tweeted it. Don't you want to know like the origins of everything related to that particular tweet and the theory that was in it? You might want to know. And you know who else might want to know? John Lauro, who's President Trump's criminal defense attorney in D.C. You might want to talk to me. Be happy to have a conversation. With that, you can find me everywhere. If you want to email me, info@raiklin.com for anybody that I mentioned wants to communicate with me for the full Monty version. But I would rather do it for the whole country to hear and see. I offer myself up to Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson, but I think at this point, Joe Rogan his audience needs to be educated on what transpired over the last 7 years. And the only way to do it is to have a full, in-depth, uncensored, 5-hour discussion with 2 producers fact-checking me while we go through the line item of each deep state actor over the last 7 years across multiple departments in our federal government. With that, Raiklin Report is out. Hello, I'm